Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by X-Rite. I'm Neil Snape. I'm a photographer, have been for a long time. I started in Vancouver and then moved to Paris. And since I've been doing fashion editorial photography, I really love doing fine art photography. I also like teaching, so I teach fashion majors at a school in Paris. I host a lot of workshops and private lessons. Other than that, I'm color imaging consultant for some products like some of the X-Rite ones. So let's get on to what we're going to do today. And so we're going to create beautiful portraits and fashion edits in less time. And I'm going to show you the little tricks and tips that I use to get through to make nice edits quite quickly. So auto controls, where they might work, might not work for you. We're going to look very briefly at applying DNG profiles from the X-Rite family of color checker passports. Using presets and applying settings in batches, those I use all the time. I'm going to show you how, why, when, where. It's really easy. Today we'll only be looking at Lightroom. Maybe using Capture One will be another webinar in the future. Importance of a calibrated monitor, how to, and which instrument the X-Rite i1 displays, which ones to choose, which one will be best for you. Setting default camera settings for imports, we'll really quickly go through that because for some of you, you might not have thought of how to do that. It's really simple. I'll show you. The rest of the time, we'll go through just a few details of about monitors and why they're important for your workflow, but the rest of the time we're actually going to go through live edits, and I'll show you exactly how I go through the edits and how I like to work, and it makes for a maximum of efficiency in your workflow. So where does it all start? You can actually color manage from the very beginning, and you can do that with an X-Rite Color Checker Passport 2, for example, and that's at the time of capture. Otherwise, it's going to be when you have your monitor. If you have a calibrated monitor, that's where your color management is the start. So color management is the start to the means to the end, and the color management, though, is not to be done at the end. It's actually from the beginning, and that's the way you work. Your camera, LCD or electronic viewfinder is not a color control point. You can't put much confidence in that. So it's going to have to be when you're in front of your monitor, and that's where you need a calibrated monitor because you need to know exactly what's inside of the imagery that you're bringing in, whether or not it be stills or video. So the ultimate start point is if you use a color checker passport, and with that you can actually create a DNG or ICC profile for your workflow and apply that when you're bringing your images in or your video footage. When possible, set a custom white point. It makes the previews more accurate and just makes it easier for you. It's not an absolute, and yet for video, always set a white point. It's easy to do if you have a color passport checker, especially the version 2, because you have both a white and a gray block to actually do that. A fallback for any other situation is to use a previously made DNG or ICC profile, and I'll show you how that works in a second. And I just see a little message to remind you that we're going to have a questions and answer period at the end of the webinar. And towards the end of the webinar, I'm also going to put you on to some really good discounts. So stay with us. It's just going to be an hour. We're going to have some fun. Let's get started. So what do you need to do color calibration and color management from the start and to the point where you're going to calibrate your monitor? If you're going to do it from the start, you need a color passport, checker passport, which is the one on the right is the new version because you have the gray and the white card. They also sell kits that have the i1 display plus a chart, so that could be convenient for you with the different models, and I'll show you the different models right now. But what these are good for is if you're going to shoot commercial photography, to get all the colors accurate in fashion, you only need to take one picture of a chart, And that's kind of a funny picture of me with a model. We're going to do about 200 different sets. If you're using the same conditions of lighting and the same camera, you make one profile, you apply that profile to all of the incoming images, and you have no further real color correction to do because it's automated. So that's the real advantage of using these charts. So for video, they have different sizes, and we also have different sizes of passports. We even have this really small one called a nano for doing macro photography. So check it out on the X-Rite site, and you'll find all the different models that they have. So where does it all go? So if you're going to do color management from the beginning, it's got to go somewhere, and it's going to go into your viewing portal. Your viewing portal is where you're looking at your images. You can't know what are the colors in the images unless you have a calibrated monitor, and you do that by using the devices like the X-Rite i1 display. So personally, I use the BenQ SW line of monitors. I use a SW270C for stills, and when I'm editing video, because I need a higher resolution screen, I use a 32-inch 4K monitor because it's got a native resolution. Those work out really well. So the next picture, I hope you can see this clearly on your screens. You can put up your thumb if you can, otherwise you have to put it in the chat that you can actually see a difference in color because I can't see you on the other side. This is just an image to show you if the colors are right on the right hand image and your colors on your display are showing the left hand, which is a lot more yellow, etc. That's a sure sign that your monitor is probably not showing you the right colors. That's why it's super, super important. For me, everything is about the monitor calibration because I want to have fun editing my images and not make it a bad experience. So I do that by having a really well calibrated, high quality monitor, and it makes life a lot easier. So the next image, a painting, which one has the right colors? Well, the artist probably had the intention of the restored image, which is on the right. But if your monitor is showing you false colors that are skewed somewhere else, then that is the real reason why you want to work with a good calibrated monitor. So it's really simple. It's not only for stills, it's also for video. So if you do your calibration for your monitor with an i1, it's also for what you're going to do with your stills for now and for the future, because you always have to know what you're doing in either domain. So a brief introduction, we'll go over this really quickly, but there is a trio now in the family of i1 displays. Traditionally, most of us have been using, as it's marked, the trusted i1 Display Pro. Why is it trusted? Because we put full confidence in this instrument, and it's the #1 instrument in the world for calibrating monitors. It's really fast, it's efficient, it's reliable. It comes with i1 Profiler, which is an application that's really customizable in any different direction you want to do. You can do uniformity controls for your screen, you can do trending, all sorts of other things in the application. So it's a very professional application. The device is a little bit faster than the other one that's on the left, which is a new one. I'll talk about the new i1 Display Pro Plus. What is that? It's the same calibrator. It has a little bit a different set that it can profile monitors that are very high luminosity, so 1600 nit and above, which is like the Apple XDR and Asus monitors. So if you're going to have HDR monitors, and there will be a lot coming in the future, this would be your better choice to do that. It comes with the same i1 profiler as the Display Pro. Yet, if you want simplicity, yet the same quality of monitor calibrations, you can choose the i1 Display Studio, and it comes with an application that's automated but simplified. So those are your three choices, and they're all good. You can't go wrong with any of them. How do you do this? You just set your calibrator on your screen. It will measure a bunch of patches, and it will make a profile from what it reads and compares to the video signal out. The only things that you really have to be concerned with, the really important settings are, 1, your white point. That's the first one. D65 for web or display, video, or all sorts of other things. and say D55 or 5000K for print. The second most important thing is setting your luminosity to around 120 candela per meter square for display or web, and an absolute maximum of 160. Otherwise, your screen will be way too bright compared to everybody else's devices. Now, if you're going to match your prints to your monitor, the biggest complaint we get is that the prints are too dark. It's actually not the prints that are too dark. It's because you didn't set the luminosity to a reduced setting so that you can compare the light that's hitting the prints compared to the monitor. So if you're going to do that, set your luminosity a lot less, and you'll be very happy. You will actually get a print to monitor match. Just note your system brightness settings if you're going to make two different profiles to do that. It's really easy. Now, if everything is done right, and for this one, as you saw before, I had made a DNG profile. I applied that to all of the images coming in. There's very, very little retouching and no color correction to do thereafter, because you've optimized your camera in those lighting conditions for color. You're not just letting it use the default settings in Adobe. You're actually going to use the colors that are coming into your capture, and it depends on what camera you're using, and it will correct for those. So that's the easiest way to get a fast, efficient, professional workflow method for fashion. Can this be used for portraiture? Of course it can. And it's exactly why we're going to go through in just a minute a few images. So after the fun part, let's see what happens. This one, I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to close that, and off we go into Lightroom. Can everybody see what's on the screen? Do you see Lightroom back there? I don't know if somebody's going to answer me. I hope so. So I've made a collection. Good. I've made a collection of images just from different folders that we're going to go through. So the first and the easiest thing to do, if you do have a color checker passport, is how do you make a profile for that? It's incredibly easy. It's so easy. I don't know how they did this, but they did it. Anyways, when you install Color Checker Passport, it installs a little export plugin module and an application. When you right-click on it, or if you go to export, you go to export, and you go up to Color Checker Camera Calibration. That's in my export presets, and I'm going to call it 5D Mark III Fashion Series. And what it's going to do is it's going to send this out in the background off to the application, and you can see up in the left-hand corner, processing profile. It's actually sending out all of the information. The application is super smart. It's going to find the orientation of the chart. It can be sideways, upside down. It'll find it. Even when you don't have to shoot a full frame of this, anywhere in the image is fine. Just hold it flat towards the light, and you can see Color Checker Camera Calibration. The profile has been generated successfully. Lightroom must be restarted to activate the profile, which is very true. I'm not going to restart it because I already have one. That's as easy as it gets for color calibration from the start to apply that to all of your images coming in that series, okay? So when I said before about how would you apply a previously made one, if you're shooting in your same studio with the same cameras, you just apply that profile that you had made before with the same lighting conditions. It changes very, very little if all of the conditions are stable. So let's go and see. I'm going to try to move this over to the side. Yes, I did. Good. Let's go and see one image. Now, anyone will do. This one. This was set on the same way. I'm going to go to the develop module. I'm going to hit reset all. Poof. That's the way it came in from the camera. I don't know if you can see on your screens because it's quite small here. It's marked profile, Adobe standard. Those are the colors that Adobe assumes your camera, in this case it's a 5D, that it sees. If you have a Sony, it'll be different. But anyways, it's based on what Adobe thinks that your camera will see. If you click on the four little squares, it's a grid. There you have all your Adobe presets. You can roll over them and it'll change. And yet here are all my custom profiles. So Alfonso Daylight Flash, I'll pick that one. Now the colors just changed in the chart to that. If I go to this one, it'll be slightly different. It depends where they're made. Now when I close this, it's marked Profile, Canon 5D Mark Flash. Now the colors are correct. It didn't set the white balance though. It only set the colors of the chart to your capture. So if I want to now do a white balance, any one of these little tiny things with the notches in it, I guess I could make it bigger. You click on any one of those or in the grays that are here. Now I just did a white balance and now my colors are color corrected and I can apply that to any other image that's in there. So if I wanted to apply that one backwards to that one, in the develop module, you'll see at the bottom right, it says sync. And in sync, you double click it and you can check all or check none. And in this case, we're just going to set it to check all. And then I'm going to say, no, I'm wrong. So I'll go back to check none. Treatment and profile. I could set the white balance or I could do it independently. So in this case, the only thing I'm going to do is apply that profile to this image. Now when I click on that one separately, it should have said, but it didn't. Oh well, that's how it's done. Now it's done. Okay, so I'll close this and then you can color balance. Any one of these with a notch in it will apply your neutral to the gray balance. So now I've set the white balance. Everything else then thereafter will be edits on top of the correct colors off your cap. And let's go back to the more fun stuff. So I'll press G, go back to grid. Let's find some images and start playing with them. Here's an image that I like. So that's a whole series. Now I said we'll take you through some of the things, how do you edit quickly? So if I go back, this is in library mode and I can press G for grid. How do I select my images? So I put one finger over one, number one on the keyboard, number two, and X. So I use my arrow keys, right? So I'll go, that one already had 2 stars. I don't know if I like that one. That one's X, she's got her eyes closed. That's a reject. Later on, I can delete it. I go on to the next one. Don't really like that one. Don't know if I'll reject it. I'll just leave it no stars. That one, it's okay. I'll give it a white 1 star and just keep going. It's starting to get more interesting. So I gave that 1 star. And when I find one I really like, 2 stars. 1 star. Not as much. Oh, it's looking really good. That's really nice. So I can even give that one 3 stars. Then when you do filtering, there are some settings you can use on the bottom. It's just above the film strip, not inside of the grid, because that's giving that to individual images. So the film strip, you do filtered by, and you can click it by 1 star. And the reason there is none, because last time I used it, I had the yellow label. So now I have all my images with 1 star. So I could go through them again, or I can press 2 stars. Now I have the ones that I selected that had 2 stars on it. In between these, and I have 2 that have 3 stars. If I press N, it takes me into survey mode. Then I could actually take one out and say, it's just not looking as good there. So there I have 3. If I press grid again, they're still selected, but I can say 3 stars, all with 3 stars. And then I can go N and go through them again. Okay, which one of these 3 do I really like? Which one do you like? Imagine it's the one on the left. Okay, it's definitely not the one on the right. And then I go back to grid and I hit 4 for 4 stars. Now, if I filter by 4 stars, there will be a lot less. So I have that one, this one, this one. Let's go and edit one now. Here we go. So I'm here. I can press the space bar. It'll get bigger. I can press D for develop. And we're going to start to edit. Now, you can see that it's on Adobe standard, so nothing is applied yet. let's say that all of my images are coming in and I want to apply either that color profile or I wanted to apply lens correction, which I do. Those ones are set. And I can change this one to the profile. That should change a lot. That's fine. We're going to close this one. If I wanted to set, and I can also, one of the things I change often, I'm just watching out for my time, detail, sharpening. I've already preset this. My camera, the radius of the sharpening is a little bit too much by default. So you have over sharpening, which is really a criticism for Capture One more than the Lightroom. Lightroom still though at 1 radius is too much. So I set this to 0.7 and the mounts, I leave them around where they are and that everything's fine there. If you had some other things that you wanted to do because you found your camera is too contrasty, you could actually reduce the contrast. And if you wanted to set this for every image coming in, you wouldn't want to set it for white point, or you could change, say, saturation, say they're coming in too saturated, which sometimes with Canon cameras, it is a little bit too saturated. Let's say if it was a Sony camera, they usually come in a little bit too green. So you could actually give it a couple of points of magenta for tint. And then you go up to this setting, set camera defaults. So that's under the menu that's there. And you can, since I already have a preset for this camera, I could update it to this. Or if you didn't have one, you would set this to use as default for this camera. You can actually do it by serial number. So if you have multiple cameras, you can have different settings. Now, whenever you import your images, it'll have a little bit less sharpening, maybe tiniest little bit more magenta if it was for Sony, and a little bit less saturation. So that's the correct way to use default settings for your camera. Make sure that you have, I'm going to cancel out of this one because I'm not going to change them, but you can make your own. And it's lens correction. Make sure that you have both of these selected, because by default, they're not always selected, so that you want all your images when you're bringing them in from your SD cards or CF cards or whatever, that it has remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. Then it's going to find your lens and the distance and distortion, everything else. So that's the fastest way to get your images in, where it's already has your pre-corrections done to it according to the serial number of your camera. So let's go back to editing this one. What are we going to do with it? So this time I told it that I'm going to use the profile that's here, which is the Canon 5D flash, but it wasn't flash. So if you don't want to use that one, you can go back to browse. You can roll over whichever ones you want. You can see that the Adobe ones, they're okay, but they're a little bit flat. And that's why a lot of people actually like Capture One better. I don't, because it's actually Lightroom is really super fast and efficient. So I clicked on that one. It's fine. Close. Now it's recorded. Profile. There. Now, automatic things. Let's see what happens if I hit auto. It didn't work for us because it said that there's a lot of magenta in her. So it tries to make an average white balance in this case. So auto on the white balance, it doesn't often work unless you have a lot of different colors in it where it's going to balance everything out. So landscapes, you probably have more luck. Beauty pictures, not often. So I'll go back to as shot. So that doesn't mean we're done with this one yet. It means that we're just going to set our own white balance. I know that the wall behind is actually gray. There will be people that definitely that are more critical than I am, and they're going to say, but you can't click on the white paint because it's not a stable pigment like on the color checker passport. They're absolutely right. if I click on here, it's definitely not a neutral white. It's going to have some coloration. That doesn't matter to me. I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to find out. Because I'm shooting behind double pane glass windows, it's actually adding a lot of green. So that's what I just took out by clicking on that little eyedropper. You pick it up. I can do it again. It's got a grid, and it'll show you even the values underneath it. Wherever you click, it's going to turn that to gray. You can see now it's different because I had more yellow on this side than that side. It depends if I use poly boards to reflect light. But in any case, I think it's pretty close. I'm going to go back to there because I like a little bit warmer. Fine. So white balance is done. It was easy. If I would have put the color checker passport chart in there, especially the version 2, there's the gray card. It's a lot more accurate. I would just have to click on it and then it would be absolutely perfect. This way is guesswork. Just like if you use an uncalibrated monitor, it's guessing. You don't want to be guessing for images. It's no fun. You want to have fun with your images. So let's get on with it. I go down from the list basic. I go down the list in order. And there's a logic behind doing that. You would see that in some of my YouTube videos, why, and I have some reasoning, etc. So after you're done this, can you change the temperature or tint after? Of course you can. I do it all the time. So I've set my gray balance. It doesn't mean it's hard, fast, and stone. You don't have to stay with it. You could say, well, I like it a little bit more like sunset. So you can actually turn up the yellow a little bit. So go away from the blue side. And I'm actually changing the color. So perfect. For me, that looks better. Now I'm going to go down. Exposure, is it right? Yeah, it's good. But I'm going to change the contrast back to where it should be, as I had previously set that just to give you a demonstration of where it could have been. In Lightroom, if you're going to change your exposure and change the contrast or change anything else, if you double click on the word, it will take you back to 0. If you double click on the word above, that's the whole section that it will take it back. Okay, let's get started again. So exposure on this image, it's actually fine. If you look in the histogram, it's fine. If I turn on the highlight warning and shadow warnings, where what we call clipping, you can see there's the tiniest bit in blacks in the back, but that's fine. Small zones where there's nothing, that's fine. Press J and that will take you out of these two warnings. You can actually just physically click on them, but I use the shortcut J. Turns them both on and turns them both off. Anyways, come back to where we are. So the exposure is right. It's a little bit bright in the highlights because we're close to a window, so it's window light. There's no flash in this one. Okay, so I'm going to take that down a little bit. Shadows. You can just play with it to see what you think. I could take it up a little bit. It's going to go a little bit flatter. Just the tiniest bit, that's fine. White. White's going to be the white shirt and a little bit lower, a lot in the face, I imagine. That can flatten out the contrast a little bit, so that's what I did. Blacks I don't use often because it actually will crunch your image and it will move everything into clipping zone. So I'm usually pretty reluctant to move that one too much. If you do something silly and you say that's really ugly, you're right. Double click on the triangle or the word and it takes you back to 0. Presence. They added some new things. Texture, that's like sort of local sharpening. It's kind of weird, but I like it. I could add more, except it's going to give you more retouching to do. Since I like to get my images right in from the start, good lighting, even if there's not makeup, I don't want to add a lot of crunchy stuff that I'm going to have to take out later because I don't want to go into Photoshop and spend my time in my life retouching things that don't need to be retouched. So texture, I'm probably not going to add any overall in the image. Maybe locally later, I will. Clarity is a really scary slider. When I first started, it was adding tons of clarity, but it makes people really ugly. I'll show you. You don't want to make somebody like beautiful last like that, looking that way, so no. So clarity, be very, very careful not to add too much. It's actually what we call mid-tone contrast. Dehaze, that's a fun one. You can actually change things. So areas that are flat, you can flatten them out more, or you can actually increase the contrast in the flat areas only. It's really strange, but it's actually usable for more for fashion and beauty than portraits. Portraits, you want to be a little bit careful on that. But I actually added some, and I think it looks good. How can you go back and forth to see when it's good or not good? There's the backslash key on the keyboard, and you can see before. So that's before we started white point, before we added the profile. That's before we changed the contrast. Change anything. That's raw image, period. And hit the backslash key again, and that takes you back to where you currently are. At any time, to make your workflow more efficient, at any time, you say, okay, I'm almost there. I think this is good. You can make Command N, and that's actually to take a snapshot. You could label it, I'm just gonna leave the time, and that one goes into snapshots underneath here. So we have presets, and we have snapshots. We're gonna get to the preset in a minute. So snapshot, I just made a recording, a little tiny proxy file of all the things I did to it until this point, but I'm gonna continue changing things. Okay, color. I'm gonna show you the way I do it. It's kind of weird, but I just take the luminance and I just hack it. I just whack it one side or the other. Then I know where all the reds are living in here. I know there are other ways of doing it, but I do it this way because it's really fast for me. So I'm going to say the reds, I want to take them down just a little bit because Canon has a tendency to push reds a little bit creamy, so I like to take them down. There's a negative point to that. When you do that, if anybody has any pimples, they're going to show more. Okay, yellows, that's going to be most of our skin tone. So that one you don't want to change too much, but you might say, let's take the saturation down just a touch. Okay, yellows. Okay, that's the background. Lighter, darker, I don't know, you decide. What I like about, of course, Lightroom is that it's really a visual playground. All the rest of the colors, I'm not going to change too much. There's a little bit of blue in the eyes, so if I want to really go up, I can change the blue in the eyes, a little bit of aqua as well. It probably changed on their sleeve. Basically, we're done everything that's there. Tone curve, I actually don't use much anymore, almost never. But I do use split toning a lot. Split toning is false color. We're applying color all over the image. It's kind of like in curves, but it's not the same thing. So what I like to do, because Canon seems to, the shadows go kind of green, kind of crappy colors in the shadows. It's not the fault of your monitor calibration. It's actually the sensor itself. Someday maybe they'll improve that. So I actually, the way that you add split toning, I'm watching for my time, the way you add split toning is you just add saturation. When it's set to 0, there's no split toning added. It's not until you add saturation. So I'm going to add a lot to see what color I'm adding. In this case, it's somewhere over there. I'm going to take it towards a green, but you don't want to have green skin tone. So I'm going to take it from the green and go back into just a nice red. And you're going to say, well, he's going crazy on that saturation. Yes, that's just so I could see it. That's all. So take it back down again and just add just a little bit of color. The only drawback of doing this is that her eyes are going to go a little bit more red. If you want to bring the highlights back in, you can say, okay, balance. I want it only in the shadows. So I'm going to bias it towards the highlights. And you say, well, that's strange. There's 0 saturation in the highlights. That's right. I didn't do it yet. You can see if I do now, and that's really ugly, I'm going to go look for a blue to correct for the red that I added. So I'm going to look for a blue. It's around, I don't know, somewhere around there. And you say, that's ugly. Yes, you're right. That's because the saturation is way too high. This one I'm going to take down to, 3, 4, just to bring back, you can see it change. Just around there. That's all there is to it. Detail we had already done. That's by default. Lens correction is already on. Transformation, I'm not going to stretch her or make her wider or anything else. Effects, we're not going to add anything in there. And I'm going to say Command N, second snapshot. Now, if I wanted to go back to where we were before, I just clicked on the first snapshot, second snapshot. You can make as many as you want. That way, you don't have to go through this history panel with all of the settings that you've changed one by one. Okay, that's a really cool way of working with snapshots rather than history. History will stay there though. You can always modify it. You can make a copy of this as well. So if everything that I wanted to apply to this image, I want to apply it to another image, then you can click on here, create new preset, and everything that you changed in here, if you check all, I didn't do any local adjustments. If I leave all checked, if I would have had a gradient, and I'm going to change her eyes in a second, but I'm going to show you why we want to do this first. So we're going to call this one, it's Clara, right? Clara M. And let's see if we can find it. So everything's checked. Maybe I'll take out just to be sure, graduated filters and radio filters. So I turn those ones off. Everything else is checked. Great. Okay. Now, let's go back to the library, or turn down the number of stars. Let's pick another one that's similar, which should be this one. And since I'm talking about presets, how do you apply the presets? So let's go into our presets and find the one I did. I don't know, I think they have a search for it now, or don't they? I have way too many presets. I can give you some if you want. If you sign up to my mailing list, you'll get a few, but I'm going to make a whole bunch more for a new mailing. So Clara, it wasn't that one. Clara M, but I think it was with capital. Should have saved this out somewhere else, right? User presets, Clara M. I knew it was down there. It's just that Adobe, they changed it, so now they put in a second user preset before they had them all going to the same place. Anyways, that's fine. So I just applied that one. If you go back in history, you can see that on this one, if I go back, it says Clara preset. Good. So what else can we do to these ones? There's another one that's got the same preset as the one we just created. How can we apply? Here's one. It doesn't have the preset. So let's take this one. We'll command click on this one, and we're going to learn how to sync things together. So I could select 10 images, 20 images, discongruent by command clicking on them, and you double click down here on sync. When you do that, it pulls up a panel of synchronized settings, and you can check the things that you want to, check all. Now, let's say if I would have modified the eyes and put a gradient in here, then that would be applied to all images. If her eyes moved from one place to another, then you would have to go and manually move them. So you'd probably uncheck these. But we're going to apply everything else that's there, including cropping. Synchronize, and you're going to see that then this image is done exactly the same as the others. So that's how you quickly apply presets between images. There is another way. So if I'm going back to the library, and this is a little known shortcut. So let's pick one that's got a nice color, and I will shift click across here, Command Shift S. It brings up synchronize setting, exactly the same as in the develop module. I just have to be careful there's no cropping, and synchronize. And now it's going to paste the settings from the image with 4 stars to the other images. It's done. So there are a lot of things you can do with synchronizing the settings and synchronizing presets. So at any time, if you apply a preset, you can apply it to other ones. Let's go back to the other image that we were working on. I believe it was this one. Tell me if I was wrong. And so I'll go up to develop settings, of course. Snapshots, see if it has snapshots. No snapshots, so it wasn't that one. Was it this one? Okay. Where did I get lost to? Where did my snapshots go? Something is going on funny. Okay. Anyways, there should be presets, snapshots in there. They're not. So I'll go back to how I modified it. So it has in history, it has all the settings that are necessary in it that we had changed. Let's go to exactly how I modify an image. And I'll go through this fairly quickly so we can do one more image, and then we'll get to questions and answers. So I just set this to 2:1. I could set to 1:1. 2:1 is easier for me. And I click on the brush. The brush is the tool that you can modify things. These are local brush adjustments. I have a bunch of presets, and the one that I use all the time, maybe it's a little bit fake, but It's my style. It's what I like. I like people's eyes. So I'm just running over the eye itself with the settings that were saved out as a brush tool preset. So it's up a little bit in exposure, down in contrast, up in highlights, up in clarity, and now it's done. So what else would I do to this image? Well, I'll go back down in size a little bit. I have another preset that I like to use a lot, and it's called Hair Dodge. I can't even remember what the settings is. I've been using this for years, and it's really easy to do. You just make whatever, modify your settings, and save it as a preset. And so it's exposure plus 0.15, contrast down a little bit. So I follow the lines of light. I don't fake it. Wherever there's light, I follow it. And where there's not light, I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to make it a little bit brighter there, make it a little bit lively. That's all there is to it. Now, what else can we do? Well, we can go to an exposure. This one is, I'm going to go up to a preset of the exposure. And it remembers what I last used was 0.14. It can be anything. It's just, it reminds itself exactly what there is. All of that's fine. I don't think I'll do anything on the arms. That's good. Just looking pretty good there. Shadow side. Okay, click new again. Exposure, but this time I go the other direction. Here, and I'm going to, wherever there's shadow, I'm going to make it a little bit darker underneath to give it more volume. That's the way. And sometimes in the corner of the eyes, I can make it a little bit bigger to give it a little bit more volume because it can go flat. Here on the side of the head, on the top, and a little bit of cheeks that way too. That's pretty much it. So if I close this by clicking on that, on the little brush, we're done. All except for, I would still like to go back into color, and wherever there's this color, the little bit red, I'm actually going to go a little bit more orange because I think she picked up a little bit too much red in the light. And we're done. So we could press Command N again and save it out as a snapshot, even though it didn't save the last ones. I have no idea why. Okay. So what else can you do? Lightroom is not really made for taking out pimples or temporary things like this. That I do in Photoshop, but that I do really quickly because everything else is done in Lightroom up front. Click away from there. And that's all there is to this image. I think it looks really good. You might change the color of the bottom. You might change a graduate that's here. But that's all there is to making really good portraiture really quickly. And that's the way I do it over and over and over again every single day. Let's pick another one. And let's go back to grid and pick another one for you to see in real time. This one. Yeah. Hope you like this one. Press D. Take it in there. See what's going to happen. Basic. Let's see. See, I just applied the camera profile, which is better than Adobe's defaults. And we're going to start from there. And of course, I'm going to check to make sure, but since I imported this with the camera default, it will always have profile correction on because you need that to correct for your lens vignetting, distortions, and etc. So I'm going to go start off straight away and do as I always do. So press on the brush button, go down to my preset. You guys and girls can save these out as your own presets. Ah, this one's already done. So if I roll over slowly, I can see what I've done. So since I've already done this, it's not fair. And I kind of did that on purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Command apostrophe, or you could right click to make a virtual copy. And I'm going to say reset all in develop. That's the way the original looked like. If you wanted to compare both, we'd have to go back to the grid, hit compare, and then you can see the differences. So a little bit of work here and there, but let's go back to grid develop module. And I'm going to go through these really quickly. So here we are. We're going to set this back to our DNG profile. We're going to go to 2 to 1. I will go to, oops, not that one. I just want to go here, iris, dodge, and burn. At least I gave it a name that I can remember. There, I added a little bit of highlights to the eyes. Back to 1 to 1. New, exposure. Okay, since it's still in the down side, I'm going to give it a little bit more shadow. If it's naturally falling, I'm not modifying what did not exist. I'm not recreating what didn't exist. I'm only adding to what exists. In any case, that's the best way to make pictures. Because whenever you start to falsify images, it's not real anymore. It's not going to look great. So we'll go the other direction. We're going to add a little bit of light, like this. And we set the 0.01. So I'm just following the lines of light that naturally existed. It always helps because she's got a lot of structure. She's a beautiful girl. So it makes it easier for me. So I went under the eyes, and that's about all I have to do. Now we're going to go back to the hair. We're going to be done this one in 2 minutes, not more. Hair, so new hair. Burn. And it looks pretty good. And that's all there is to this image. It's done. We could actually add a little bit of clarity, since it's not skin tones, to the vest. Done, but we're going to go backwards in time and do what we could have done from the first place. There's nowhere to set a gray in here, so you don't really know. So you have to go by eye. And that's where a calibrated monitor makes all the difference. If you do something wrong here, double click on the word, it'll take you back to 0. Tone control. I think she's a little bit green, so I'm going to go into tint and go up a little bit. And remember I said I like split toning in the shadows. Look at how fast you can do this. So you whack the color, take it back into so it's not green, and somewhere around there, and just add just a little bit of, we're looking good. That's it, back to the beginning. You can check for vibrance or take away a little bit because it's a really colorful image, a little bit more. And guess what? Image is done. Takes how many minutes? You can see before and after. Before, after. In what did we do? 3 minutes, 4 minutes on that one? Good. So auto controls. I only went through the first on white balance. Let's see what happens if I hit auto here. Wow, I don't know. That's pretty ugly if you ask me. So in this case, it made some good ideas, but it was hard light, so it's a little bit too much. So you can actually modify after you hit auto, and then modify them back again. So shadows, it took them way up. I like images to be contrasty. Blacks, I'll take them up, so it's not so contrasty. Exposure, I'll take it down. If you don't like it, double click on tone, and it goes back to 0, or we had it. Well, I think we covered everything. I know you want to, well, I hope you want to ask some questions. No questions so far. Here's your chance. Ask me anything about editing in Lightroom, how you make the pictures, what you want to do. You have a chat box. Just ask away with your questions there. Okay, so we're going to continue a little bit, but please start asking your questions and then we're going to go through them. So I'm going to go back to library and we're going to do a black and white. How do you do black and white? Or how do you do this one? Okay, here's a pretty cool image. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to reset it. What did it look like in the start? A lot different. So how do you do an image like this? Well, we can change our white point first off, and we can make it even a little bit greener or not. But we can definitely go to color, find the greens and the yellows, so they're there, saturate them. You can change the actual color of them. Same thing for aqua and blue. So I'm going to make them a bit darker. Change the hue, again, a little bit more green. And blues, should be a lot of blue in there. Yeah, not that much. Okay, so I did that. And still waiting. Nobody has any questions for me? Have I explained everything too well? Go up into a gradient, draw a gradient down like this. And we're going to set it to range masking off. We're going to set it to natural color. We're going to click on the eyedropper and we're going to click in all of those colors. And then we're going to modify just that, except we don't want it in hair dodge. We're just going to go to temperature and we're going to see what happens if I make that a lot more yellow and a lot more green. That's pretty cool. Saturation, I'll take it down a little bit. Neat. That's how you do it. If you wanted to erase some of that, click on brush, oops, brush, and you can actually erase it like on her face, so make sure there's nothing hitting her. Nope, no questions. Okay, well, you've been very patient. I'm hoping that you will ask some questions. We still have time. Let me put this out of the way for now, and let's go back to the slide presentation, because there's some really good stuff here for you. Since you're being patient, and you deserve this, and you're going to be excited when you see it. So it's Command Enter. So you have some really good discounts on, so for Europe, UK. So go to the website, xritephoto.eu, and use this code, Neil's N25, and you get 25% off of all of the items that are below. So i1 Display Studio, Pro Plus, the new one, Color Checker Photo, Color Checker Photo Kit. That's the one that has the chart, and so is the other one for filmmakers. Isn't that cool? I think it is. I highly recommend that. Now, I have to go back down one more. Why am I up that? Or maybe I have to go backwards. Okay. Now, here's the other absolutely amazing deal. They had it last year and they have it again. I don't know what they did, what they had to give away to get this. But if you buy the according products, which will be the i1 Display Pro Plus or the Pro and some other products, you'll have to go off into the site to see. You get 1 year of Adobe Photoshop or photo program, which includes Lightroom and Photoshop for 1 year. So basically, they're almost giving you the device to calibrate your monitors. So I highly recommend that you use the code that's above and get yourself 1 year of free Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom. So do we have any questions yet? Yes. Do you have a target you're adjusting towards, or are you deciding on a picture by picture basis? That's a very good question. Since I do lighting in the more similar fashion often, that's something that a lot of people, they say that you need to use a X-Rite color checker in every picture you do. I can't agree with that, because color in life, it changes. It depends where you are and what it's doing. Yet the advantage of using the color checker for your camera in a similar situation, like say if it's outside, make a profile for outdoor lighting. It doesn't have to be at sunset or beginning of the day. You don't have to make them all the time, but one at a normal lighting situation where you make a profile for that. It's not because it's for the lighting that's outside, it's actually for your camera, how your camera sees daylight. Because with that profile, it's going to extend your capabilities of your particular sensor in your camera. And that's the advantage that I see of doing it this way. That's why it's good to save out different collection of profiles, but you don't really have to use the chart to use every single time you make a picture. If you're in a studio and it's not your studio, maybe their lights are different. Then I'd recommend making a separate profile for those lighting conditions. Yet the idea of the chart is that it extends the capabilities of your sensor with your lens in that situation. That's why I think that for people pictures, you can apply the same profile to a lot of different situations, still have great results. Great question. Any others? Should we go back to, did everybody get the code? So I go back one slide, if I can. It's not cooperating with me. My slides, I'll try this. There you go. Code's behind. So www.xritephoto.eu. Neil SN25 is your code. So that'll get you a discount for all of the things that you need to do calibrations or even color management from the start. And you can get the discount with the products that are listed on the other thing for the Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom for a year, which is an absolutely fantastic thing. So, or how do you do that? How do you make a Lightroom or how do you make the DNG profile? It's like I showed you before. You right click or go to the export slide in it doesn't matter if it's in the grid or develop module. You export it as the camera calibration, and it does it in background tasks. And it launches the application, finds all the patches, and creates a DNG profile if it's in Lightroom. And if you're in phase 1, you have to export it as a TIFF and import it into the application, and it will create an ICC profile, and then you can apply it thereafter. How do you make the profiles? You just simply shoot the chart pointed towards the camera in even illumination, flat towards the lens, and that's all you have to do it. It doesn't take into account the white point. The white point you apply after. So you use the profile to align your camera's colors, and then the white point is actually applied after. Okay? Have some other questions about images? Should I close this one out? Escape. Back to Lightroom when I can find it. Must be here somewhere. And I think we're going to wrap it up because we already saw lots of different ways of doing it. I appreciate you coming and listening into our webinar today. I hope that you gain some tips and tricks on how to make things faster and efficient, and that you learn something about the importance of calibration, of course, for your monitors, what it does for you, what the charts can do for you. And the most important thing is that you, as we all do, appreciate the passion of photography and the power that it gives us to work with. So I want to thank everybody at X-Rite that are working behind the scenes hard on doing this, and all they've done for us in photography. And you will also receive an email with a video recording, so you can watch it later if you didn't have time to stay with us to the end. Thank you very much, and see you again.